as we greet you from Ilford in London, in Britain, with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have, mashallah, a gathering of people from so many different countries. Nearly everyone is from a different country here. And this is part of the miracle of Allah's deen, but it attracts people from so many parts of the world. And we have a very important subject to share with you today. It's not the first time that I'll be speaking on this subject, but the young ones are growing up. And so we have to repeat for those who've never heard it before. Our topic is on Zul-Qarnayn, Gog and Magog, and the second Qarn of Qarnayn. And if a subject is mentioned in the Quran, then proper methodology is we must build our understanding of that subject from the Quran. Why? Because Allah says of the Quran that it is absolute truth. وَإِنَّهُ لَحَقُّ الْيَقِينِ. That this is absolute truth. The hadith is not absolute truth. Indeed, our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, prohibited recording his words. And it was not recorded for some 200 years after he died. Excuse me. The Quran is also divinely protected. Evil cannot approach this Quran from any side. This Quran cannot be corrupted. It is absolutely authentic. The Hadith does not share that same status. But the Hadith is important. Because our Prophet Allah sent our Prophet to teach the Quran. And so we have to turn to him for our understanding of the Quran. Well then, how do we deal with both the Quran and the Hadith? Answer: when you have studied a subject from the Quran, using the proper methodology to study the Quran, and Allah tells us what is the proper methodology, that you don't study the Quran beginning with Surah Al-Fatiha and then Surah Al-Baqarah and then Surah Al-Imran. That's not the way to study the Quran at all. You have to study the Quran the way you study the stars. You have to get the connections between verses. And you have to see patterns in the sky like you see patterns in the book. And then when you connect the dots in the Quran, you see that which binds all the verses together on a particular subject, then you get the system of meaning of the subject from the Quran. And that's not a work for schoolboys. That's a work for scholars. And when a scholar teaches the Quran this way, then you learn from him. When a hadith is in harmony with the Quran, you can accept it. But what happens when a hadith is in conflict with the Quran? Answer: you take the Quran. You stay with the Quran. Don't allow the hadith to take precedence over the Quran. Good then. So on this subject, while we have to commence the subject with Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, we eventually go to the Quran. And the subject begins, of course, and I will be speaking slowly and clearly. And my language would be simple. And I want you to put on your thinking caps. Because if I teach the subject clearly, slowly, simply, and you still don't understand, it's not my problem, it's yours. You have done something to your mind that you're no longer capable of thinking. That's not my problem, that's yours. I advise you to go back to the Quran, recite the Quran so that your Quran can cleanse your mind. Good. So we begin now with the problem that the Quraysh had. That here was someone who was born in Mecca and who lived such an admirable life that they gave him the name Al-Amin, the trustworthy, the truthful, the trustworthy. You could depend on this man. And lo and behold, when he reached the age of 40, he then said that I am a prophet like unto Abraham and Moses, and you should not be worshipping these idols. You cannot put God in a temple. You must worship the one God, the God of Abraham. And this is false. So they decided we'll send a delegation to the city in the north, which is called Yathrib. Now it's renamed Medina. And let us ask the Jews, because the Jews have so many prophets, and the rabbis are there in Medina. Why is, as they say in French, la crème de la crème, the best of the rabbis, why are they there in this Arabian city? Good question, eh? Good question. So they send a delegation to the rabbis. How can we tell whether this man is indeed a prophet of the one God? And the rabbis responded, ask him these three questions which only a prophet can answer. One of the questions was about a great traveler who traveled to the two ends of the land. The two ends of the land. It couldn't be the two ends of the earth because there's no end to the earth. If you keep on traveling from London in one direction, just keep on traveling, you'll come back to London. And don't believe me? Try it out. Travel from London in one direction, keep on traveling, and you'll come back to London. Yes? So, the two ends of the land, not two ends of the earth, because the earth doesn't have any ends. And when Allah responded to give the answer, He chose to begin the answer by repeating the question. And this is how it begins in the Quran. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويسألونك عن ذي القرنين. And they question thee, O Muhammad والسلام, about someone who is known by the nickname Zul-Qarnayn. Zu means something that you possess. Zul-Qarnayn means someone who possesses Qarnayn, two Qarns. The word Qarn has two meanings. It can mean a horn, so Qarnayn will be two horns. Or it can mean a generation. A generation, a people, an epoch, a time. So two generations. Zul-Qarnayn will be someone who either possesses two horns or impacts on two people, two generations. Good. And Allah then describes Zul-Qarnayn as someone who has been blessed with power. And he has the power to pursue whatever goal he chose to pursue. He has that power. Allah bless him with that power. He can do whatever he wants to do. But his power rested on foundations of faith in the one God. So when power rests on the foundations of faith, how will power be used? Zul-Qarnayn travels to one end of the land, the first journey, and it is in the direction of the setting of the sun. And the sun was setting, this is not literal, in a body of water which was dark and murky. Yeah. Commentators of the Quran, including Ibn Kathir, have identified that body of water as the Black Sea. And if you know your geography, you'll know that Crimea is in the Black Sea, and Crimea commands the Black Sea. So Crimea has a very important place in eschatology. When he reached to the Black Sea, he met a people there, and Allah then spoke to him. Did you hear that? Allah spoke to Zul-Qarnayn. I don't have any evidence that Allah spoke to the Greek Emperor Alexander. If you have the evidence, present it on Judgment Day. I don't have that evidence. I don't have the evidence that Allah spoke to an Iranian, a Persian emperor named Cyrus or Darius. If you have the evidence, fine. On Judgment Day, you present it. So I do not identify Zul-Qarnayn with any historical personality. This is my decision. You want to do it, go your way and leave me alone, please. So when Allah said to him, how are you going to deal with these people? When power rests on the foundations of faith, how will power be used? That's the question. And Zul-Qarnayn replied, and he said, those who are guilty of wickedness, of oppression, injustice, zulm, I will use my power to punish them. And so when power rests on the foundations of faith, power is used to punish the wicked and the oppressors and those who are unjust. And then he went on to say that when I am finished with them and they return to you, you will also punish them. And so when power rests on the foundations of faith here on earth, there will be harmony between here, below, and there above. What a wonderful world that will be. He then went on to say that those who have faith and who are righteous in conduct, I will treat them nicely and reward them. So when power rests on the foundations of faith, those who have faith in the Lord God and who are righteous in their conduct have nothing to worry about. No. They will be protected and they'll be treated nicely and they'll be rewarded. This is the first journey. And if the end of the journey was at a body of water named the Black Sea, then the other end would have to be at a body of water. And which body of water is it? Which one? Caspian Sea. Good. I'm happy to see you have your thinking caps on. So he then traveled in the direction of the rising of the sun. And he reached to the Caspian Sea, which is Azerbaijan, Armenia. And there he came across a people, لَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ مِنْ دُونِهَا sitra. Sitr is that which covers. That which covers. Sitr. So he came across a people for whom we had provided no covering except that which was provided. No covering except that which was provided. Meaning, and now here is interpretation of the Quran, meaning a people living perhaps a primitive way of life. So how do you deal with people living a primitive way of life? If you are in a place called America, or what is now today called Canada, and you live the primitive way of life, well, not even the Lord God can help you, because a barbaric people will come without even an ounce of sympathy in their hearts, with a PhD in oppression, and will destroy you and enslave you, and yet go to church on a Sunday morning and worship their Lord. The primitive people who live such a beautiful way of life, they would not kill a bison, never, unless they wanted it for food. And when they kill that bison, they would use every single thing that could be used from that bison for benefit. Nothing is wasted. What a wonderful people they are. So long as they were living in America, you could go to any river and take some water and drink it. You can drink water from any river. But when these barbarians came, they polluted every river. They did it with chemicals, they did it with sewage, they did it with everything. And yet they call themselves a civilized people. And they have a birthright of superiority over the rest of mankind. Yes, that's what they did. And today the native people of Australia, the primitive people of Australia, they built a shack in front of the Australian Parliament. They built this shack and they said, "This is our Parliament." What you did to us, the native people of Australia. But mankind today have more important things to do than to study this history. But Zul-Qarnain respected the primitive way of life. He had the compassion. He had the integrity to put human values above every other value. So even if there is an ocean of oil underneath the Caspian Sea, and Baku tomorrow is going to be the oil capital of the world. You know Baku? He would not take these people and move them away so he can get to exploit the oil resources. Okay? The oil resources. Yeah. The human being is more important than the economic resources. So he left them as they were, undisturbed. And Allah responded and said, كَذَلِكَ. كَذَلِكَ. He left them as they were. وَقَدْ أَحَطَّ بِمَا لَدَيْهِ خُبْرًا. And Allah understood why he behaved like this. So when power rests on the foundations of faith, that power recognizes human values to be supreme. And a human being is an object of respect, whether he is so-called civilized or primitive. And his rights prevail over all other rights. Then Zul-Qarnain traveled in a third direction. But the rabbis never asked about that. But Allah knew that they asked about the first and the second journey, but they wanted to know whether our Prophet knew about the third journey. So Allah gave them the answer. And when he traveled on the third journey, he came to a pass between a mountain range. And if this is the Black Sea and that is the Caspian Sea, what is the name of this mountain range? Huh? Caucasus. The Caucasus Mountains. Okay? And the Caucasus Mountains, they stretch from the Black Sea all the way to the Caspian Sea, and there's only one pass in between. Only one. Anyone here from Georgia? No one from Georgia? Anyone from Azerbaijan? Anyone from Armenia? Anyone from Russia? Nobody, okay.
We used to be part of Russia.
Okay. So he came to this pass between the mountains. And there he came across a people لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, whose language could not be understood. Why? Because this language is not connected with any other languages in the region. None. And that is the Georgian language. And there the people spoke to him and said to him, "O Zul-Qarnayn, Gog and Magog are committing acts of facade in our land. Can you help us? Can you build a barrier to protect us? And if you are prepared to do that, we are prepared to pay you." So Gog and Magog are people who commit facade. What is facade? Facade is an act of corruption which threatens to destroy. So it is evil. Can an angel commit facade? Huh? No, an angel can't do it. Okay, so then apart from the angel, you have only jinn and you have human beings. I'm tempted to add a fourth, American presidents, but let me leave that out. You have angels, you have jinn, and you have human beings. Can jinn commit acts of facade? Yes, they can. And human beings, of course. So Gog and Magog have to be either jinn or human beings to commit facade. Which one will it be? Will it be jinn or will it be human beings? Let's see. So Zul-Qarnain replied and said, "I don't need your money." Like Suleiman as Islam replied when Bilqis said, "I don't need your money, what Allah gave me is more valuable. Just help me with manpower. Bring blocks of iron, Zubarul Hadid, blocks of iron." So this has to be a region with lots of iron ore. And that is precisely what you have at that region in Georgia. Then he built a furnace to melt, to cut the iron, and then he built a furnace to get molten copper. And he built a barrier, very tall, very high, and blocked the pass. And when he blocked it, and he said about this barrier, هذا رحمة من ربي. This barrier which I have built is an act of mercy from Allah. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي. But when that time comes of which my Lord has warned, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّ. Allah is going to bring it down. وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي حَقًّا. And then the warning of my Lord will come to pass. Did Alexander ever say this? Could Alexander speak like this? Could Cyrus and Darius ever speak like this? That this barrier which I have built is an act of kindness from my Lord. But I am telling you that when that time comes of which my Lord has warned, he will bring down this barrier. And then the warning of my Lord will come to pass. Put on your thinking cap. Can Alexander or Darius or Cyrus speak like this? No. And yet so many of our scholars acting with intellectual recklessness have identified Zul-Qarnayn with Alexander, with Cyrus, or with Darius. And when I try to teach, they will not listen to me. So what do? Now then, so he built the barrier. And when he did it, Gog and Magog could neither penetrate nor could they scale. So can they be jinn? No. Why? A jinn could pass through the wall. So now Gog and Magog will have to be human beings, because there are only three categories of creation. You have the angels, you have the jinn, and you have human beings. Once you put on your thinking cap, look at how easy it is to understand the Quran. So you're not going to be expecting Gog and Magog to be living in the interior of the earth, and they have 4 pairs of ears and 6 pairs of head and all this kind of nonsense. Huh? Would you allow a fabricated hadith to take you on a ride? Or would you go to the Quran to learn to study the subject? So Gog and Magog have to be human beings. Why? Because they commit fasad. Is there anyone who differs with me? I know there are those who differ with me, but they're too scared to say so. So they'll remain silent. And when they go back home, then they'll blast me on the internet. But this audience today, I don't think you have such people with such low character. Gog and Magog are human beings. But they're human beings who commit fasad. And Allah has reserved for fasad the greatest punishment of all. There are different gradations of punishment, but the highest level is cut off the hand and the feet from opposite sides and crucify them. That's the punishment in the Quran for fasad. And Gog and Magog commit fasad, meaning they corrupt everything they touch. And the corruption is such, it's so dangerous that it threatens to destroy. They corrupt the political system, they corrupt the economy, they corrupt the market, they corrupt the monetary system, they corrupt the educational system, they corrupt the system of time, they corrupt the relationship between men and women, they corrupt a woman's role in society and a woman's role in a marriage, they corrupt it. And the corruption of such that it threatens to destroy. So society will collapse, will disintegrate when they are released. So this is the first Qarn, Qarnain, an event which will occur twice in history. So when will Allah bring down the barrier? And when will Gog and Magog be released into the world? The Prophet ﷺ told us it's a hadith al-Qudsi, meaning the direct speech of Allah but not in the Quran. He said that Allah said about Gog and Magog, I have created creatures of mine so powerful that none but I can destroy them. So now we can understand when the people said to Zul-Qarnayn, please build this barrier to save us from Gog and Magog. Zul-Qarnayn should have said, what nonsense, I don't need to build any barrier, I'll go there and punish them. And when I'm finished with them, they wouldn't even raise their little finger again. But he didn't do that. Because even though Allah had given him power to do whatever he wanted to, his power was not enough to punish and destroy Gog and Magog. The only thing that he could do was to contain them. And I like to use in the language of chess, we call it to checkmate them so they become harmless. And that's what's building the barrier. But when they are released from the world, what's going to happen? We leave Surah Al-Kahf and we go to the only other reference in the Quran, only two. The second one is Surah Al-Anbiya. And in Surah Al-Anbiya, Allah speaks about a town. And he destroyed the town. He expelled the people of the town. And then he placed a ban on them that they could never return to this town to reclaim it as their own until Gog and Magog are released and they spread out all over the world. So now, put on your thinking caps. There is an event to occur in human history, and it will occur only once. Only once. That a people who have indestructible power, but whose power is godless, it rests on foundations which are godless, and who use power to corrupt and to destroy. These people will appear on the stage of the world, and they will spread out all over the world. And when they do that, they will control power in the world. And they will then bring these people back to that town from which Allah had expelled them. This will occur only once in history. It will be such a momentous event in history that if you can't see it, you're blind like a bat. You're really blind. You should send your mind to the laundry. Yes, if you can't see it when it happens. Let me repeat what's going to happen. When Allah brings down the barrier, then eventually a people will emerge on the stage of the world who will have indestructible power. No one can punish them. No one can destroy them. No one can fight them. And with this indestructible power, they will spread out all over the world and take control of power in the world. But they will use their power to corrupt, to commit facade, to corrupt and destroy. And when they are spread out all over the world, they will then bring these people back to that town from which they had been expelled by Allah. Good? I wrote Jerusalem in the Quran 22 years ago. The book is at the back there. 22 years have passed since I identified the town as Jerusalem. And there's evidence to support me. Because our Prophet said, Allah's blessing be upon him, that Gog and Magog will be destroyed in Jerusalem. Allah will attack them as a biological warfare, attack them with something at the top of the spine. And they'll all fall down paralyzed, and by next morning they're all dead. Jerusalem. So I identified the town as Jerusalem. So who are those who had so much power, who used power to oppress and to corrupt, who spread out all over the world and took control of power in the world, and then brought the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own? Who did it? Answer: modern Western civilization. That's right. And I've been teaching this for 20-something years. And this is the truth. This is correct. Guess how many of your scholars of Islam agree with me? I can keep on teaching for another 20 years. It makes no difference. Yes. They will not at all accept for me that this is the explanation of Gog and Magog. On the contrary, they say, no, Gog and Magog will only be released. The barrier will only be brought down. And Gog and Magog will only be released when Jesus returns, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, and he kills Dajjal. Only then will Gog and Magog be released. Okay, if the barrier is still standing, let's go and find it. Huh? If the barrier is still standing, let's go and find it. That's the Black Sea there. This is the Caspian Sea here. This is the Caucasus Mountains. And you have something called Google Earth. Every square inch of the earth has been filmed. And you can sit down with your laptop and you can check it out. Where is the barrier? No, they don't want to hear anything I have to say. I'm using this hearing aid for the first time, so excuse me. I have to learn to use it. And so now, we have identified from Surah Al-Anbiya that Gog and Magog are the ones who will bring the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own. They've already done that. And therefore Gog and Magog are those who control power in modern Western civilization. They are a people who use power on the foundations which are godless. They say they are Christians, but now you can see all their churches and cathedrals are being sold. I have a question to ask. This is the house of God. Is it only a masjid that can be a house of God? I have a question to ask this gathering today. Is it only a masjid which can be recognized as the house of God? Answer me.
No.
Huh? Go in the Quran and see what Allah says in the Quran. In Surah Al-Hajj, Allah never says that the masjid is the only house of God. In the Quran, Allah makes mention of the church, the cathedral, the synagogue, and the masjid. So can you buy and sell a house of God? Why is my audience so quiet? Huh? Can a house of God be bought and sold?
No.
Could you ever sell a masjid?
No.
Well, if you cannot sell a masjid, can the Jews sell a synagogue, or would it be sinful for them to do that?
Sinful.
Huh?
Sinful.
Sinful, yes. And if the Christian is selling his cathedral in his church, would that not also qualify as sinful?
Yes.
Yes. And when people are doing acts which are sinful, how do we respond? The Prophet said, Man ra'a munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi. Whosoever sees something that is sinful, change it with your hand. He didn't say go and buy the church. He said change it with your hand. Stop them from selling their church. Stop them from selling their synagogue. Change it with your hand. وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ And if you cannot change it with your hand, then change it with your tongue. فَيُغَيِّرْهُ بِلِسَانٍ And if you cannot change it, you're talking and they wouldn't listen to you, they're still selling. فَبِقَلْبِهِ Then detest it with your heart. But that is the lowest stage of faith. So what do we say about a people who abandon? Number one, change it with your hand. Number two, change it with your tongue. Number three, change it with your heart. And they collect the money and they go and buy the church. And they declare it's a masjid. Do you know any scholar of Islam in Britain who has condemned this? Is there anyone? You don't know anyone? None. And yet, this is shameful and disgraceful to sell and to buy the house of God. You will not do it for a masjid, but you'll allow them to do it with a church and a cathedral. And you go and buy it and then transform it into a masjid. This is the state of intellectual poverty, disgraceful state of intellectual poverty of the Ummah here in Britain and in other parts of the world as well. And so now, we have identified Gog and Magog. And there are people who have power, but their power rests on foundations which are godless. And they use power to oppress. And they control power in modern Western civilization. Oh, good. So now what remains is, since it is Qarnain, and we know about the first Qarn, because that's in the Quran, when will the second Qarn comes? Because when the second Qarn comes, Gog and Magog will once again be contained and checkmated. This is a very not only interesting part of the subject, but this is the frontier of knowledge. When you reach here, you've reached the frontier of knowledge. And if Allah blesses you, I hope there will be those coming after me who will extend the frontiers of knowledge. It certainly is not going to come from the Darul Uloom. Not at all, because they don't think. They're not producing scholars in the Darul who have the capacity to think. So when will the second Qarn comes? My answer is, if the first Qarn was geographically located in the region of the Black Sea, then I will look to the region of the Black Sea for the second Qarn. And when I see power emerging in the region of the Black Sea, and that power rests on the foundations of faith, and that power is resisting the oppressor, and that power is helping those who have faith and are righteous in conduct, I say here is the second Qarn. So in 2014, in fact before that, the Soviet Union was an atheist state. Religion was prohibited. And the Soviet Union oppressed the priests, the Christian priests, and also imams, the Muslim imams, for 70 years. But during those 70 years, the Soviet Union was transforming Russia from an agrarian economy to a modern industrial state, and transforming the social system from serfdom to a modern state, and building Russia as a scientifically and technologically advanced state. Indeed, the Soviet Union became a superpower, capable of challenging the West. So Allah used a zalim to fulfill his purpose. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. You have to put on your thinking cap to be able to understand this. As soon as the Soviet Union collapsed and folded its tent and disappeared into the darkness of the night, guess what happened? Russia began to return to her Orthodox Christian heart, the spiritual heart. That process of return has not as yet been completed. I know that. For example, the Russians still don't know that riba is haram. They don't know that. They don't know as yet that it is the bogus monetary system we have today is haram, and that you should be using dinar and dirham as money. But they're moving in the right direction. And then something dramatic happened. When Sulaiman alayhi salam got the news that a woman was a ruler, and that she and her people were worshipping the sun, did Allah create women to rule? No. Simple, in the Quran it says, "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa." That men have a responsibility to maintain and to guard and protect women. Allah sent so many prophets. Did He ever send a woman as a prophet?
No.
Huh? Why is the status of a mother 3 times higher than the father? Because the duty she has to perform to fulfill her functions is so strategically important that if she ever becomes a part-time mother, puts her career before her family, the world will be filled with criminals and drug addicts and children engaged in sexual promiscuity. You'll have a collapsing society when the mother fails to be a mother. So Suleiman was so angry at this news. He sent a message, "Come to me in submission." They decided to send some gifts. He refused it. He said, "I'm coming." Then he asked his court, "Who can bring me a throne?" The throne was a very precious throne, beautiful throne. Why did he ask for the throne? Before she should come to me, I want to bring the throne. Why did he ask for that? What relevance is there? How is it connected with this? A woman ruling over a people and worshipping the sun. Good question. An Ifrit from amongst the jinn, remember the jinn have to work for Suleiman. He said, "I can bring that throne before you rise from your cot." It is 2,000 kilometers from Jerusalem to Yemen. How is he going to bring this throne over that distance in so short a period of time? And then someone who had the knowledge of the Kitab, he said, "I can bring that throne for you before you can wink your eyes." Which Kitab? There's nothing in the Quran on aerodynamics. There's nothing in the Torah and the Gospel on aerodynamics. You go and search. But this book has the knowledge. So it cannot be one of the scriptures. It has to be another book. I call it a book of aerodynamics. And I refuse to say this is one of the scriptures sent down by Allah. So when he said, "I can bring that throne for you before you can wink your eye, in the twinkling of an eye," what this story in the Quran is telling us, for people who have the capacity to think, is that there is knowledge in that book, which if you are able to access it, if Allah blesses you to access that knowledge, you will be able to have your missiles flying at a speed comparable to the twinkling of an eye. Today it's called hypersonic speed. And as soon as the Soviet Union folded its tent and fled away and disappeared in the darkness of the night, Allah blessed Russia. And in a short period of time, Russia got access to this knowledge, and Russia now has hypersonic missiles flying at hypersonic speed that the Western world has nothing to match. So that a president of Russia could say today, "We can destroy the whole of the United States of America in half an hour." And when Russia speaks, you better listen. You better listen. And so when Russia recovered Crimea in 2014, I was in Malaysia. I said, "It's time for me to celebrate. It's time for me to celebrate." Because power had returned to the region of the Black Sea. And it was power resting on the foundations of faith. And now we're seeing that power being used to resist the oppressors of the world. And Russia is constantly warning and warning and warning. If you continue like this, you're taking the world to nuclear war. The warning has been given several times. And if nuclear war takes place, this is the second Qarn of Qarnayn. This is my view. What will happen in that war? What is going to be the result of that war? First of all, you have to get answers from Surah Al-Rahman, and then answers from Surah Al-Kahf. In Surah Al-Rahman, it is strange that Allah should repeat one ayah 31 times. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Is this by accident? Can anything happen in the Quran by accident? Why has Allah repeated one ayah, one verse, 31 times? Answer, He's knocking on your head 31 times to tell you, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. There's something in this surah of absolute importance. Pay attention 31 times. The punchline in this surah comes after the introductory verses of what Allah has done for us. When He says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان. I'm going to deal with both of you who are both laden with sin. Who are the two? فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا رَبِّكُمَا, two of you. تُكَذِّبَانِ, who are godless people. You reject the truth which has come from Allah. And I'm going to deal with you. Who are these people? Human beings who are in alliance with the jinn. There's a book at the back called Dajjal, the Quran and the Jasad. And in that book you see where Allah explains to us that the shayateen of the jinn were obliged to work for Sulaiman alayhi salam. And if they ever disobeyed, they'd be punished. But when Sulaiman alayhi salam died, the shayateen still saw him sitting on the throne. Yes, he's dead, he's buried. But the shayateens are still seeing him sitting on the throne and walking and talking. Why? Because the Jasad is sitting on the throne and the Jasad is holding on to the staff. And the staff has a miraculous quality which allows it to penetrate, to enter into time and move time backward and forward. But I don't want to concentrate on this, you get it in my book. So a civilization will emerge laden with sin. And this civilization is going to be assisted by the shayateen. This is it here. This is it here. And Allah says, سَنَفْرُغُ لَكُمْ أَيُّهَا الثَّقَلَانِ, that I'm going to deal with both of you. This is in the war which is coming. Modern Western civilization will be defeated in this war. Will be defeated in this war. Gog and Magog will not be destroyed. Rather, what will happen to them?
God will destroy them.
In the second count, what will happen to them?
You're going to drink all the water from...
They will be contained for a second time. They will be checkmated for a second time. This is about to take place when the Great War takes place. But even though Gog and Magog have been checkmated for a second time in the north, as they were the first time, would the world then be free of Gog and Magog? Let me hear your answer. Why? Don't just shake your head, you must give it. Tell me why the world will not be free of Gog and Magog, yes?
They're too powerful. Because they're going to be killed in Jerusalem.
I need some more information than that. The answer is that Allah's messenger said that Gog and Magog would leave the north and move down to the Sea of Galilee on their way to Jerusalem. And as they passed by the Sea of Galilee, they would drink the water. Is this what you're talking about? Drinking the water? No. Drinking the water means consuming the water, excessive consumption of water. And by the time the last of them passed, they will say, there used to be water here. So even though they are checkmated in the second Qarn, the implication is no more can come. Those that remain now are checkmated. But what about those who have already gone down to Jerusalem? They will still be there in Jerusalem after the Great War. After the Great War, Pax Judaica, and Israel becomes a ruling state. Okay? After the Great War. And Gog and Magog in Jerusalem will not be destroyed until Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns. And when he returns, Nabi Isa alayhi salam will kill Dajjal. And then Allah will destroy Gog and Magog in Jerusalem with the virus at the back of the neck. I have offered for you today an analysis of the subject that you probably cannot hear from any other Muslim at this time. I would ask you to kindly think carefully. Go to the Quran, study the Quran, and try to analyze and determine whether or not what I have presented to you today is acceptable to you. The Prophet said that Gog and Magog will pass by the rivers and they'll drink up all the water. They're very thirsty. So when you see rivers running dry, this is evidence of Gog and Magog. The river Euphrates is running dry now. The big lakes of Canada, and the ships have to use new routes to navigate in the big lakes, the Great Lakes. Gog and Magog waste water. And this is the amount of water you're supposed to use in wudu. Look at my... This is the amount of water to be used in wudu. The amount of water that can go here. Good? How many people use this much of water today? They open the tap and the tap is flowing. And at the time they finish their wudu, they've used about 30, 40, 50, 100 times the amount of water you're supposed to use for wudu. Okay? Gog and Magog pollute water. In Medina, in Mecca, they will go early in the morning before the light comes to do their numbers. They will dig a hole, they'll bury it, and they take some water to clean themselves. including our Prophet and his wives. So this was a very sensible way of disposing of human waste because it fertilized the land. But today we said, no, that is a barbaric way. We have a better way. We take all the sewage and we pump it into the sea, and we pump it into the coastal waters, and we pump it into the rivers, and you call that progress. Here's an example of Gog and Magog, the link with water. One more and we'll finish. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the hadith is located in Sahih Bukhari, لَتُحَجَّنَّ الْبَيْتِ, you will continue to perform the Hajj, and you will continue to perform the Umrah, بَعْدَ خُرُوجِ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ, even after Gog and Magog have been released. The Hajj and the Umrah will continue. But then he said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى لا يحج. The last hour will not come until the Hajj has been abandoned. No more Hajj. When will that happen? Most likely in the Great War. Because after the Great War, Israel wants to take over from the United States as the next ruling state. Can Israel take the chance of all the Muslims gathering in Mecca for the Hajj while Israel wants to become the ruling state? No. This will be too great a danger for Israel. So the Hajj will have to be abandoned, and as Israel already have their peoples ruling over Saudi Arabia. So the Hajj will probably be abandoned after the Great War. And that's just around the corner. And the Prophet said that if the Great War takes place and Hajj is abandoned, then that is the proof. Gog and Magog have been released a long time ago. Did you understand this? No? The people will continue to perform the Hajj and the Umrah even after Gog and Magog have been released. But the last hour will not come until the Hajj has been abandoned. So if the Hajj is abandoned, no more Hajj, then the implication is that Gog and Magog have been released long ago. Have you understood it now? Still haven't understood it? Well, then it's not my problem, it's yours. So we're going to stop now, and you can put your questions in writing, and inshallah we'll try to answer you.
Who would like to go first? Yeah, Sheikh, just to get this going. So the first question is, in this time of darkness and chaos, what could you suggest for us to protect ourselves, especially single revert Muslim sisters?
The most important thing by far to do for protection at this time is to recite the Quran every day and to complete the Khatam the Quran every month. That is number one, and that is by far the most important. Number two, I am tired of advising you to leave this country. Even if your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents were British. I'm tired of telling you to leave this country because this country is going to be destroyed. There's no question about it. In the Great War. If you went to the remote countryside, you still won't survive. You won't survive. If a ship is sinking and you cannot prevent the ship from sinking, and when the ship sinks, it will take all on board, will perish. And if you are on board and your parents and your family, what do you do? What do you do? Oh, but Sheikh, my wife and my children tell me, you can go, Papa, we're not leaving. You can go back to Algeria, you can go back to Morocco, you can go back to Bangladesh, Papa. We are not going. Yeah? The woman are enchanted by this land. They consider this to be heaven. And the woman see no reason why we should go back to hell. Praise be to Allah for that woman, that wife, that mother, who can see that no, this is not heaven. This is hell. I don't want my children to grow up in this country. Praise be Allah for such a wife, if you have such a wife. So my second advice after telling you to recite the Quran is to make hijrah. If your heart is comfortable in this country, comfortable, then when you're ready to leave, Allah will block you. You'll not be able to go. You betrayed Allah. You won't be. You're trapped now in this country and you'll never be able to escape. But if your heart is in the right place and your heart is restless, I am not comfortable here. I don't want my children to grow up here. I prefer to go back home and eat dal and roti and give up the big mansion and the lovely, expensive motor cars. I prefer that. Then Allah can make it easy for you to make your hijrah. And thirdly, there will come a time when it will be too late. Don't wait for when it's too late. When you leave and you go back to the land where your parents were or to any other part of the world of Islam, do not live in the cities, because the cities are filled with Gog and Magog. Pakistan, don't go to Karachi. Karachi is filled with Gog and Magog. Don't go to Lahore, most of all, don't go to Islamabad. But rather, the Prophet said, flee to the mountainsides and places where rain falls, and take with you some sheep and goats. So to buy land, instead of buying a new car here, buy land over there and open a farm. Because he said sheep and goats. And buy the land where there is water. And go to the mountainsides, go to places where rain falls. And this is the best way to survive, yes.
Okay, I'm going to stick to questions that are relevant to the topic today. Are Gog and Magog, are they facilitators for Dajjal's mission?
Yes, Gog and Magog are working for Dajjal. That's right. Next.
Are the humans, Gog and Magog, mentioned in the Quran the same Gog and Magog was in corruption today? If yes, how is it that they have remained alive for such a long time?
None of them dies, said the Prophet, without leaving 1,000 more behind. So Gog and Magog have this capacity to transform people and make them carbon copies of themselves. So the world is constantly experiencing more and more Gog and Magog. Yeah.
What does Gog and Magog mean? Is there any spiritual meaning?
The Quran has not offered any answer to that question. We know about Gog and Magog. Number one, they are human beings. Number two, they have indestructible power. Number three, they use their power to oppress. Number four, when they are released, they spread out all over the world, so you can't miss it. You have to be blind not to see it. It occurs only once in history. Gog and Magog spreading out all over the world, taking control of power in the world. And number four, Gog and Magog will bring the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own. Yes?
Just moving slightly off topic. Is marriage still a good idea at these dark times? And if yes, how do we find a good spouse since the majority are westernized?
There are other scholars who have devoted enormous amount of time and effort on the subject of marital relations. I have devoted my time and effort to eschatology, but there are many scholars, I believe, who have done great work and who are able to advise better than I can advise. The Prophet said, Allah's blessings be upon him, he said, خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. The best of you are those who are best to your family, and I am the best to my family. In Surah An-Nisa, Allah advised you about wives who are rebellious. Dajjal's feminist revolution is transforming women and making them rebellious, unwilling to be obedient to their husbands. And Allah says in the Quran about such women, when you have a wife like that, this is the process. Either you warn them, and if the warning does not solve the problem, put them to sleep separately. And if that does not solve the problem, then the Prophet said, use something like a miswak and strike them. This is not an act of brutality. This is not meant to inflict any injury. Not at all. A miswak is a psychological blow to try to wake her up. But if you take a miswak and strike her, and then she takes off her shoe and strike you in your face with it, then you know you made a mistake. It's a hopeless situation. So you have to divorce such a wife. If you continue in such a marriage, then you're foolish.
Okay. In Surah Rum starts by referring to the Byzantines' Rum. They are defeated and then a victory. Do you think that a Rum will suffer another minor strategic or even a technical defeat before they destroy their enemies, i.e. NATO?
The Quran does not tell us that Rum will be defeated twice. The Quran tells us that Rum will be victorious twice. So, Rome today, Rome was Constantinople. I think we have this lecture coming up.
Yes, on Monday.
Yeah, Monday. Rome is Constantinople, and Rome today is led by Russia. So we know that there's a second victory coming for Rome, And that second victory has to be in the Great War.
How will Gog and Magog be contained the second time? So I think he's making this in reference to the first time being iron.
Yes, I am of the opinion that the second containment of Gog and Magog is already taking place. That Gog and Magog, for the last 100 days, since Russia intervened militarily in Ukraine, Gog and Magog have not been able to intervene militarily in Ukraine. Something is functioning as a barrier, preventing them from intervening militarily in Ukraine. And that's the hypersonic speed of the Russian missiles. And the fact that Russia can destroy Britain probably in 10 minutes. Russia can destroy Germany, Russia can destroy France and Italy. Russia can destroy United States and Canada and Australia. All of these countries can be destroyed within minutes because of Russia's power. So perhaps the first time it was a barrier built of blocks of iron with molten copper. And the second time it is the hypersonic speed of the Russian missiles.
If Gog and Magog have taken most parts of the world, how is it safe to migrate back to places like Pakistan and Bangladesh?
The evidence that Gog and Magog is in the place is in their footprints. When you see a people living in the remote countryside and they're not wasting water, look at how they make wudu. You're beginning to collect the evidence. It's a good place to live. Look at the way the women dress. Allah cursed the modern West. Kunu kiradatan khasiin. You're going to live like apes. So Monkey Town. Oh, in Pakistan they taught me Bandarabad. And the monkey is naked. But that's not despicable. That's his way of life. But when you see a people incrementally taking off their clothes and showing a preference for public nakedness, that's the way to get out. Okay? So when you make your hijrah, look to see how the women dress. And that's the place to live, where the women are not taking off their clothes. Gog and Magog, Allah cursed them to live like monkeys. Monkeys have their bedroom life in public, but that is not despicable for them. But when you find a civilization showing a preference for sexual relations in public, you know, these are people cursed by the Lord God. So go and take a look where the places where you want to make hijrah and see whether this decadence of public sexual relations is creeping in. And if it's not, that's a safe place to live.
From Yusuf, he's 11 years old. He says, Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Are you going to make your own Muslim village in your homeland? And he says, by the way, I am trying my very best to complete the Quran in 1 month.
MashaAllah. I had a choice to make 15, 20 years ago. The choice was I could build a Muslim village myself, but I have to stop writing books. I have to stop traveling and teaching. And I said, no. If I am the only one who can build a village, we should not have a village. Yes, if I am the only one who can build it, forget it, we won't have a village. That's right. So I continue to write my books, and mashallah, 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 you can see the work. And I've continued to travel. I tell you, honestly, I prefer to be home. I prefer to be at home with my home, living with the comforts of a home, eating the food of the home. And whenever I leave my home, I leave with tears in the heart. Yes, because it's not an easy life for me to travel at this age, and now traveling alone. Okay, so I must prefer, but I'm doing this. I'm doing this because this is what my teacher trained me to do. He expects us to do this work. Hmm? So yes, I have not built a Muslim village, and I am not going to do it. Let others do it. Yes.
Why are most scholars in the world not accepting what you say on Gog and Magog? Are they part of the corruption of Gog and Magog?
I believe that there are those who have sincerity in their hearts, and they're scholars of Islam, and they're devoted to the deen, but they do not have the methodology for the study of the Quran and Hadith, and they are scared about breaking ranks. If we break ranks from our peers, we will be ridiculed. So we prefer to remain with the pack rather than to break ranks.
Will Russia be friends with the Muslims?
The Russian government has just announced that anyone who disrespects Islam in Russia will be arrested. Can you expect that from Britain?
No.
Huh? Could you expect that from the United States? Anyone who shows disrespect for Islam in Russia will be arrested. That is my answer to you. Go ahead.
What is the role of Turkey during the Great War, and what do you think about places like South America to do hijrah?
South America is a good country, good place. Many Christian Muslims are in South America. Many of them are Syrians. Many of them are Palestinians, Lebanese, and they're in Venezuela. They're in Brazil. They're in Argentina. Large numbers. It's a good place, yeah.
And the other part was, what will Turkey's role be during the Great War?
I don't think that Turkey will ever leave NATO. And those who are hoping that Turkey will leave NATO, you're living in fantasy land. If Turkey remains a member of NATO, then when the Great War takes place, Turkey will be at war with Russia. If Turkey is at war with Russia, Turkey will be destroyed. Next.
If wife wants to go for hijrah, but husband doesn't, what then should the wife do?
When hijrah becomes obligatory, if even you have to leave your wife or leave your husband or leave your parents or leave your children, you make hijrah. So if the marriage has to end, let it end. But you must make hijrah. If you have to leave your children behind, leave them. But you must make hijrah. If you make hijrah, then you at least have a chance that the rest of the family might come and follow you. If you remain where you are, then all will perish, including you.
So, Anwar Riza from Sri Lanka, he says, Surah Kahf, verse 18, is this indicating end time? Is this indicating that in the end time we can have a dog for protection?
The dog is more faithful to his master than we are to Allah. The dog will weep and weep and weep for years for his master, waiting for the master to come, while we have forgotten Allah. The dog should not be kept inside the home. No, for purposes of hygiene. You don't kiss a dog and let the saliva of the dog come upon you. Not at all. But other than that, to have a dog for protection, that is Suratul Kahf. That is Suratul Kahf. To have a dog for protection. Yeah.
If the Dajjal has one eye, are Jews going to accept him as Masih?
When Dajjal stands up in Jerusalem and he declares, Anal Masih, I am the Messiah, my Salafi brothers, and they are my brothers, will look at him and say, no, he cannot be Dajjal. Why? He has two eyes. And our Prophet said that Dajjal sees with one eye. Shall I continue? Because the Salafi accepts this as muhkama, plain and clear, and does not accept it as mutashabiha, as something that has to be interpreted. We say that when Dajjal sees with the left eye symbolizes external sight, scientific and technological knowledge and so on. And when Dajjal is blind in the right eye, it symbolizes internal blindness. And all those who follow Dajjal will also be like that, internally blind. But while there are some Salafis who listen to me and accept, the majority don't. They don't do that, yeah. Okay, one more? One more.
Two short ones if you can. How long will Dajjal rule and how will we identify Isa alayhi salam?
Nabi Isa alayhi salam will be identified by the Imam, not by you, Imam al-Mahdi. How long will Dajjal rule the world? Dajjal was first a shadow. Suratul Mursalat. And when the shadow has ended, then Dajjal will appear in human form, and this is after the conquest of Constantinople. We don't have a time frame. We only have a sequence of events. Yeah.
Okay, and that's it for today.
All right, so you can get the books and bring them for me, and I can then autograph them for you, inshallah.